Welcome to the Imagineering Education Podcast. My name is Thomas Riddle. To all who come to this happy place, welcome. With those words, Walt Disney introduced the world to Disneyland. And with those same words, I welcome you to this long-time dream called Imagineering Education. A dream that really began during a visit to Walt's other happy place known as the Magic Kingdom. It was there in 2010 as I explored Tom Sawyer's Island with my 3 young sons and stood watching them play in Scavenger's Fort, that an idea came to mind. Having spent the previous 3 days playing and laughing our way through Animal Kingdom, Epcot, and MGM Studios, it occurred to me how much we'd all learned while also having a lot of fun. We had discovered fascinating facts about various world cultures while making our way through the World Showcase at Epcot, gained a newfound appreciation of ongoing conservation efforts in Animal Kingdom, and so much more. So I thought to myself, how cool would it be to bring kids on field trips to Disney World? As I pondered the logistics of that for a moment, another thought came to mind. What if instead we designed schools like Disney designs theme parks? The idea lingered the rest of the day, and it never really went away. Over the next 3 years, I studied the ways in which Disney Imagineers carefully design every space, every sight, every smell, every sound to create incredibly immersive experiences that engage us emotionally and leave long-lasting impressions. Along the way, I developed connections between the work they do and the work I was doing as an educator. The culmination of this work came in 2013 when I was blessed with the opportunity to speak at TEDx Greenville on the topic of designing engaging and immersive learning experiences in school. That talk, Reimagineering Education, became the spark that ignited the dream of sharing these ideas with others. Time passed. Life happened. More important things took priority, but the dream never faded. With continued encouragement from my wife, who has helped me navigate the ups and downs, the starts and stops, and the oh-so-close moments of making this work, it's time to heed my own advice from that original talk. It's time to shift from just dreaming into actually doing. You know, one of my favorite Disney characters is that tiny purple dragon known as Figment. As he and his creator, the Dreamfinder, like to say, one little spark of inspiration is at the heart of all creation. Right at the start of everything that's new, one little spark lights up for you. It's our desire here at the start of everything that's new that Imagineering Education will be the spark of inspiration for you, both personally and professionally, through our presentations, workshops, webinars, blog posts, and podcast episodes like this. We hope to equip you with an increased ability to do the same for your students, your business, your family, and yourself. A dream can be a dream come true with just a spark in me and you. And at the beginning of everything that's new, I'm excited to have 2 of my favorite dreamers, Mr. Ken Morrill and Mr. Chris Beyerle. Guys, welcome. We have a long-time connection going back many years. Chris, I think you actually taught one of my sons or 2 of my sons, did you?
Yes. I taught Mr. Benjamin Riddle, and that was back when I did honors geometry class at Malden High School. It was quite a while ago.
Wow.
So
it has been a while. So, Chris, tell us just a little bit about who you are and what you're teaching now, and then we'll let Ken have a go.
So I am a engineering teacher at Fisher Middle School now, where I've done that for the past 3 years. I do a design modeling class where we learn 3D CAD modeling, and we 3D print those models, and we go through a design process. I also teach a green architecture class where we learn the basics of what it means to build green and sustainability. We talk about LEED certification and what that means, and we go through some really neat challenges that middle school students can handle. And I also teach automation robotics, where students learn not only different mechanisms, but learn to code and design and build robots.
That sounds like so much fun. Ken, what about you? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you teach.
Yeah, first I want to say thank you so much for having me. This is an honor to be sitting with both of you in this room having this discussion is a dream come true, I think. So I teach visual art and design at Fisher Middle School. I teach with Chris, 2 floors above him, and I get to look out on a hilltop that's called Roper Mountain to my probably favorite place in Greenville, Roper Mountain Science Center. So the view is amazing. The colleagues are phenomenal. My students learn how to make artistic choices and how to use new technologies mixed with old technologies to tell their stories and to learn the stories of others. I pride myself on not just teaching the old dead white guys, that we study all cultures across time and place, and contemporary artists who are talking about stories that we're hearing now. So we also have a virtual reality system, which is awesome. I got to bring that home with me for COVID, so that's fun to use. Did a lot of work with 3D printing. Haven't done that so much this year. Try to create some kind of boundaries where if Chris is doing 3D printing, I might be doing 3D modeling to tell a story, or students to create something for the world of the future. And then he does the 3D printing end. So it's kind of nice to be part of a puzzle piece where we're teaching these kids how everything's connected.
So how often do you guys get to collaborate?
I would say not as often as we would like, but each week we definitely have conversations about the projects that we're doing, how we can work together, and ways that we can make what we're doing beyond our walls, but extend to other teachers' classrooms and out into the community. So I would say definitely at least once a week or so, but we would hope we would be able to do more, but
I think
things
I think that's one thing that as classroom teachers, a lot of us, I don't know, some people like to be the island unto themselves, but then there's a lot of us who are very passionate about collaboration and pulling our varied talents together to create some really cool projects. And so I think that later on in our conversation, we might get into some of those really cool projects you guys have worked on and are working on currently. So
I would say the cool thing about working with Ken is he's a what if. You know, what about this? What if we tried this? Who can we talk to about supporting our project from the community? How can we help, push students' thinking, get them making things that are incredible and amazing? He's a pretty big global thinker, so.
I think that's the case with both of us. Chris and I collaborate by sharing our dreams and our hopes for our students. And we may take those in different directions sometimes, but we definitely bounce ideas off each other and create these grand schemes for what directions we might go. So we have like a whole, if you take a compass and you look at the 4 directions, we've subdivided that into millions, because when we go to the center of that, we're then creating new focal points on the horizon for where we want to go. So we may be going to different parts of the points on the horizon, but we're definitely helping each other navigate those waters to get there.
And that's fantastic. Chris, you said one thing about Ken, and I would say the same thing about you. Knowing your work is the importance of the question of what if. That's one thing that really Disney's Imagineers, I think that's something they've done very well. And really for any creative endeavor, I think that's really the starting point, right? And so, Imagineering is the process by which creativity is combined with technical know-how that results in innovative ideas. So to either one of you guys, to what extent do you believe this process applies to education? And how do you think so? Ken?
Yeah, so, man, I think in order to do what we're talking about here today, be big dreamers and then take those dreams and do something with them, you need to start with imagination. And I know a lot of adults who kind of think imagination is a thing that children have, and innovation is something that adults have in places like Silicon Valley. But I believe the people who are innovative are just applying their imagination to an end. Innovation tends to be towards something. Imagination tends to be these stories we tell ourselves that, these grand adventures we could have. Indiana Jones is a great adventure story, but it takes George Lucas to make it something that's an innovative film. So putting that into the classroom, I think, is is something that if more people had conversations like what Chris and I have, or that we all have together at Roper Mountain when we come together around an idea, we'd see much bigger things happening. And I know we'll get to that question later, but I think there's a huge place for innovation, but I think it also needs to stem from imagination, because that's how we connect with children. And if we don't have that connection, it's a lot harder to innovate in a classroom without that connection to a childlike state of thinking.
Yeah, that's good. Chris?
And I think one of the big pieces in education, the part that is amazing about imagination and Imagineering is to remove barriers. I think part of the key piece of being an innovative educator is to remove those barriers that we put on ourselves, those blocks that tell us no or you can't. We need to look at what is our ultimate goal as educators. What are we trying to build or create? If we really want our students to remember those experiences that we're making in our classrooms, I think the ones that the kids remember are the ones that have that little bit of danger. They're going to remember those things.
Right.
If I think about, you talked about Indiana Jones. I was just thinking, I watched Swiss Family Robinson the other day, and what's cool about the movie is not just the story, but there's intentional components of danger. There's a family, and you want to keep watching because of the suspense, because of the danger. It has elements of pirates and those kinds of things. And in a classroom setting, when you say, hey, we're going to be cutting this piece of wood here, and you may have kids that have never picked up a hammer or a saw or anything like that. So they remember that. That might be a milestone moment where they're developing a skill just to cut wood, but that element of danger excites them. So I think we need to ask ourselves as educators, what can we do? What might we do? Who can help us with this project? Who can we reach out to? Who can we collaborate with? How can we make this idea become reality, rather than, oh, this is going to stop us. This is going to stop us. We can't do that. We can't do that. We can't do that. We have this testing coming up. But really look at, what do we value, and what is the reason we became a teacher? And it's most likely not to make that kid a great test taker. It's, because we wanted to make an impact on that child's life.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And if I can jump in on that, what I'm hearing you both say is something that just makes my heart leap, because that imagination piece is not left to just kids. It's left to the teachers as well, and the administrators, and everyone involved in the education process, that we need to maintain that imagination, maintain that ability to think, what if? What could I take to the next level? Something else, too, that I think about when I hear you talking about the element of danger, Chris, is that, that's involving the emotions. And so, again, we know, and the Imagineers do this to great degree, that if you're emotionally engaged in something, that's going to result in a memory that's lasting, okay? So if you think about your favorite teachers or your favorite experiences in school, there was usually emotion attached to that memory. Yeah. Same way on a negative thing, in anything in life. If you remember something that's negative, there's like that worst teacher or that really bad experience in class, again, there's emotion related to that. And so I think what we're trying to go for in an Imagineering education classroom is those positive emotional experiences. And also, I love the idea, what you're saying about the element of danger and the risk of doing something, but what about the risk of failure? Do we as teachers promote the idea that it's okay to fail?
Yeah, and I think that goes into the classroom culture that's created, and what are you celebrating as a teacher or as a class within your space. When you talk about the grade after every project, I think you're embedding the idea that the grade's what's important, rather than at the end of the project, are you celebrating the process?
Wow.
Are you showing the students that you appreciated their persistence, that they didn't give up, that they had an idea that they tried, may have not have worked out, but maybe they pivoted from that idea and they tried something else. So they actually learn from their failures. And when you acknowledge that as a teacher, I think that's powerful. I think that sends the message to the students that, hey, you know what? I see you. I saw what you did there. You had a mistake. You learned from it. You tried something different. And I think that's awesome. I think that sets a culture. I think that sets a tone as a teacher that this is a different type of class. We focus on the process. And if we want success, we got to go through those trenches of, we're going to face some struggles. We're going to face some setbacks, but can we learn from those, develop, build on that, and make a better project?
And that's life, right?
Yeah.
That's life. Go ahead, Ken.
And I'm glad Chris is the one who brought up celebrating. I was going to, and it just didn't seem, because I was going to give Chris accolades for all the celebrating he does. Yeah. He celebrates with his students all the time. I can walk past him in the hallway, and he's celebrating something with a student. And I think we need far more celebration because there's so much fear that's driven by adults' fear. Every adult who's building the structure of education is embedding this sense of fear of failure into it. Maybe not intentionally, some are intentionally. It's a motivator for some people. Sometimes it's a powerful motivator if you're progressing a story or you're progressing the challenge that students are going through. But that's authentic fear. It's not inauthentic fear that is a number associated with how a student does on one assessment at the end of the year. But what we keep talking about with our principal, Jeremy Smith, is awesome. I want to give him props too, because he constantly talks about how are you making a relationship with that child? Is it through celebration, or are they going to remember you because you cared more about the numbers they were producing? And I love that.
Well, I think you might want to talk about what you do with kind of student work when they're talking about their work on display and they get feedback.
Yeah. So how do you celebrate, Ken? How do you give feedback? And is it, what kind of celebration is it?
Wow, there's a lot of different ways. The thing that you might see happening in the classroom would be a student presentation of their work, as if they're an artist who's giving an artist talk. I also have meetings with them independently if I need to give real solid feedback of like, here's how you improve this technique or this application of media next time. Let's maybe try these. But at the end of every artist talk, it's snapping. Like every student is expected to snap. We're gonna offer each other. Yeah, man. Exactly. Yeah, it's like a beat poet night or something right. in Greenwich Village in the 1960s. But I don't know if that's where you're going with it, Chris. Immediately, that's what comes to mind.
What I see you do too is you give them choices. You give them choices to excel at a strength that they might already possess. And I think when I've seen you give feedback or when a student's presenting, you kind of push them to say, what about if we added this component? Or what if we, went a little bit further with the detail on the hair or something like that? I think you're kind of acknowledging the work that's been done, but you're also pushing them to get to another level, to see them be even more successful or create a better piece of art or a better piece of what they're trying to create. So I think what you do with students is you give them opportunities, and I think that's how you see students be more successful is not just create one assignment and everybody does this one recipe, but you're giving them multiple opportunities, and I think that's where we see more outlets for creativity. We see more opportunities for imagination, where it's not one person doing the exact same recipe, but you're giving them voice and choice in the process.
Well, that's beautiful, because what I'm hearing is that choice piece, and I think that is so essential for us as educators to provide as much choice as possible. One size does not fit all. Right? There's no such thing, or should not be such thing as lockstep education. And
I've seen Ken have a student working on a pinball machine.
Right.
And then I have another student do a self-portrait. So, that's a pretty wide spectrum of...
Yeah, and in both your classes, what you're talking about and what I hear you saying is you're encouraging creativity. So, So what is the role? You guys are in an engineering class, but Chris, in a former life, you were a math teacher as well. You never separate that. So in all of these, I was a social studies teacher forever. What is the role of creativity in education in general, is there room in a standards-driven world of education? What's the role of creativity?
I think it's huge. If we want our students to reimagine a future that they are going to be running, they're going to be the leaders of this future. I can just give an example of a project that we did with my students where, they can look out the window of the classroom and see cars in the parking lot. And so we had a question, and our projects typically start with a question or a problem of, what does the future of transportation look like? How might we create a vehicle of the future? It doesn't, and my challenge to them is to reimagine mobility. What does that look like? We saw that from the Jetsons. They reimagined what mobility looks like, from going into their house to flying through space. They reimagined beyond just the scope of 4 tires on a chassis, something beyond just what we see out in the parking lot. So that's the challenge. Is it starts with a problem that students need to kind of think of what could we do? What can we make? What can we build? And I think early on, students just want to copy. They just want to repeat what they see. But if you push them to go beyond that, give them a structure with a question and some criteria, and keep that criteria open-ended enough to where it doesn't stifle, what they're trying to do. So they have some limited boundaries, and I think within some boundaries, you get creativity. Architects can do a lot with a space, and I think architects love when there's more complicated geometric shapes within a space, not just a rectangular box room.
Not just the common features.
Right. And I think when there is more geometry within a space, you tend to see much more creativity, because they have to meet a different set of criteria. Right. And I think that pushes the limits on what's possible, because it tends to push thinking a little bit further.
Ken, what about you?
Yeah, I kind of want to end where Chris ended, but I want to start with, we're all lucky enough to be friends with Val Mosher at Roper Mountain, and I taught a summer camp with her last summer about building the city of the future. We called it Terra Bella, beautiful Earth. Mm-hmm. And we were reflecting at the end of I think the first day, on the kids coming up with these ideas that were very dystopian. And we were both crushed. We're like, what? The future is not dystopian. But we grew up in an era of E.T., Star Wars, which is sort of dystopian, but they're saving the galaxy.
There's hope.
Yeah,
that's the commonality. There's hope.
There's hope. And then Back to the Future, which is my favorite trilogy of all time for film. And we had this very utopian idea. 2015 was supposed to have flying cars. Let's get rid of all 4 wheels and just make them fly.
There's no roads where we're going.
Roads. So I think but also I look at the other media we had. When we played games, it was 8-bit and then 16-bit. And then, oh my gosh, the high resolution of 64-bit. We had to still use our imagination all the time.
Right.
Creativity was a huge part of what we're doing. I just did a reflection on what's his name? He was credited as being the guy who put the first Easter egg in an Atari game, Adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And
Ready Player One.
Yeah, and it's from Ready Player One. But even before that, those games like Adventure and then D&D on the Atari came from games like Dungeons and Dragons. You didn't have a screen. You had character sheets where you wrote everything, and you played this game and you rolled for whatever, and you had to imagine this with your friends. There was this collective imagination.
Dude, if you ever played Adventure, you had to have an imagination to think of that dragon. That wasn't a duck. It was a walking duck, But I'm sorry. To your point, we did grow up in a time where there was imagination was greatly encouraged, and I think creativity comes out of that.
Right, and so getting back to Chris's points, like building in some constraints, taking away some of the stuff that kids already have access to help them create something new, be creative on their own, because so much of what I see in the art room is regurgitation of what they already see. And what they'll ask to do is, can I just pull up an image on my phone and draw that?
Wow,
that's disheartening. And this has happened I've seen this grow exponentially over the past 10 years. Since the first child brought a phone into the classroom, that was a smartphone, I've just seen this happen over and over and over where it takes energy. And what we have to do is encourage not just the children, but everyone who influences those children to invest in that energy that it takes to remove these things we're all so aware of, but there's also very different. Kirsten and I have talked about a lacking common culture that we have now, but to remove some of the things that they're so used to having and that they'll just remake. They won't even do anything to it. It might not even be to a high quality. So what they're seeing online, if their friends are posting some of the stuff they're creating, is this lowering of the quality that I'm seeing over and over and over. So if we don't do something about creativity, maybe I'm not saying what it is right now, it's a unique expression maybe, but if we don't do something about investing back into creativity, at least in schools, I think we're going to see the lowering of expectations of our kids and the lowering of expectations of the creative endeavors that they are part of.
Yeah, and I think when you're regurgitating facts, teaching to a test, rote memorization, none of those things encourage creative thinking or creative thought. And so it's easy for us to get caught into this trap of falling into that because as teachers, but we have these standards to cover. We have this test that's coming up. And so I feel like I'm pushed for time already because I have all of this information I have to teach. So I think that we have to become the gatekeepers of that. We have to, as much as we can within our authority, within our power, play within the constraints of our own classrooms, right? Play within the constraints of our own curriculum and then get as creative as we can because we know that modeling is an excellent way to teach. So, Chris, would you add to that?
Well, I was going to say, what could we do both where we incorporate facts that we know, history that we know, and to use that knowledge and apply it to real authentic problems that we're facing now.
Right.
And I think the key is authentic problems.
There
if you pose a question to a student that hasn't been solved, that is open-ended, it's non-Googleable, if that's a word.
Right. We just made it up.
I think the greatest projects are the ones you can't Google. You can't Google solution to this problem. And that pushes the student. I really got to figure this out. I got to figure this out. Because students, children are naturally born curious. They have a curiosity that stays with them unless it's squished out of them or pushed out of them.
To Sir Ken Robinson's talk on what we do to curiosity and creativity, right?
Today, for example, I was scrolling through social media and there was a authentic problem that I noticed where this girl just wanted to hug her grandma. How do you hug your grandma when technically you're putting her at risk in a world right now where there's this virus going around? So in order to solve this challenge, she had the goal of hugging her grandmother. She created basically a screen, not a screen door, but like a plastic door where she could still see her grandmother, but she had holes with protection around her arms and protection around her grandmother's arms, and they could still hug each other without making contact. So I thought it was a way that she saw a problem, brainstormed some ideas, some ways to solve it, and I thought she came up with a creative solution to the problem. And there's an emotional piece to it too. So I think it makes it all the more powerful is when students or kids are given authentic problems that they're trying to solve. When they're open-ended, I think that kind of pushes that creativity to another level. And I think that's something education needs more, is just more of these open-ended challenges. And I feel like in our world today, there are so many problems.
Wow, yeah.
And, how are we providing students to try to solve them? And I feel like a lot of kids could come up with some great things.
Yeah, come on. I think, that reminds me of the tiny house project that I helped lead several years ago at Shannon Forest, where we took 2 weeks and we gave middle schoolers the real world problem of solving for homelessness within our community.
Yeah.
And within that 2 week period, at the end of that 2 week period, they came up with a tiny house built from shipping pallets, 250 square feet, to serve as a model for transitional housing for the homeless, which was completely student driven, completely student researched. And not only that, they had to create a community, a transitional housing community to place those houses within. It was all authentic research. So we were using social studies. Their research skills went through the roof. We were using the cuts they just learned in geometry for angles. So we pulled our standards in.
And could you bring a literature piece in where, I'm just thinking back to the Swiss Family Robinson, where they build a house that's amazing, right? They had a problem to solve. They had no home. They had to build one from scratch.
What we call upcycle today, right?
And they could read about that. There's their ELA component there.
Absolutely. So you see those kind of things. And by the way, if you're listening, we have a blog post about that project online. We can link to that later. But those type of authentic problems. And Ken, you guys with your micro shelter. I mean, I know that your kids were highly engaged with creating micro shelters. Our point is, collectively, the three of us, is that our encouragement to teachers who may be listening is find a way to approach your standards or your curriculum in a non-linear way where it is possible. There's a lot of things that can be taught in isolation without having to build upon things necessarily. Process skills. What a great way for SEPs. The standards of engineering design processes.
Can we talk about that for a second? I just feel like that's so huge between what we all kind of do.
Yeah, and what does that have to do with creativity and imagination,
I feel like part of the reason that our kids love our classes is we trust this process. You start with a driving question, or even before that, there's an empathy component where you see someone in need, or you feel the pain or the problem of somebody, and then there's a problem or question that gets developed. Maybe it's an opportunity. It's not always a problem or question. It's an opportunity to seize. And then from there, the generating concepts or the brainstorming or the ideation starts happening, where you start blue sky thinking. The sky is the limit. Think of whatever you can. There's no right or wrong. And then you get to a stage where you start choosing or developing a solution and building a prototype, making or creating something that is going to try to solve that problem. And then you start testing and editing and revising or modifying. And then you get to a point where you evaluate, hey, is this what we wanted? Is this the solution we're looking for? Does this solve the problem? Is this going to provide the opportunity or meet the user or the client's needs? Going back to the empathy piece. And what I'm describing is not necessarily linear. It could be cyclic, where you have to go back. But then you get to a point where you share and you present and you show the user, the client, or whoever that this is what we came up with to try to solve the problem. And at some point, you have this great solution. The first iPhones came out, they were awesome. But then, there's always a little bit of room for improvement. But in talking with students, you might want to ask them what might they do to take this even to another level? What would version 2 or version 3 prototype look like? We're on iPhone, 10, 11. There's always going to be new iterations, but I think at some point, product...
It's iteration, it's not innovation.
Right, yeah. I think at some point, there is the... solution to the original problem. And I think there's always going to be room for edits and modifications, but I think that process is what we trust. And I think that's a process that our kids understand, that they can learn from failures. They can make mistakes, but they can keep trying, they can keep going, and they can keep looking at creative solutions to try to figure out a way to solve that problem or meet that opportunity, or meet the needs of whoever the client is or the person is with the problem.
I think if I just talk about the design thinking protocol, it's, as a creative person, I've always been a creative person since I was 1 and I was in a crib and drawing on the wall with Vaseline, emulating our ancient ancestors drawing on cave walls. And not really frustrating my mother. She's insane. But people always called me a meanderer or a procrastinator. And I think that was my incubation time, because before the design thinking protocol was a thing, before anybody mapped out how people creatively solve problems, creative people have always done that.
Right.
For me, and going back to you can't just Google it, there was a time when, it's going to sound like I grew up in the caves, I had to walk from my house across town to the library and ask a librarian to help me go through the card catalog to find a piece of research I was looking for. And that was beautiful because there was human interaction that heard my idea, celebrated the idea, helped me move forward with my dream, and offered other suggestions.
Wow.
Which was not linear. That's very spiderwebbed.
Right.
I think of Google as a very linear thing. I need this, I found this, I'm going to that, and I'm done. You know, there's a whole bunch of reactions, but it's not humanistic. It's not tailored toward our dreams. It's tailored toward a specific question. That algorithm that's leading me to my answer is really hoping I find an answer and maybe spend some money. The librarian celebrated and helped me move forward in various directions. And if that one doesn't work for you, there's this. And if that doesn't work for you, there's this. And there was collaboration in the community before anybody ever had to say collaboration is authentic, because that's just what happened.
There was a community that supported each other and celebrated each other.
Yeah.
That's important. It's the human touch.
Right.
Right.
And I think educators need to understand too that there's a shift that also needs to take place in a classroom that's creative or innovative, and that's that the letting go of being the center, the no end all be all, no
The sage
all,
on the stage.
Sage on the stage, yeah. How, there are those moments where you kind of need to shift between sage on the stage to guide on the side. I think those moments happen, but I think it shouldn't be sage on the stage all the time. And understanding that when you're not the expert, when you let go of that, you can actually invite the experts in. There are people in the community, and if they're not local, there are folks available via video conferencing that can talk to your students and give them real advice from the field.
And again, that comes back to the human element, though. Again, it's not just that having someone, the expert, come in from outside is such, I've discovered, you guys can, I'm sure you found it too. When you have that outside expert come in, it's so much more impactful than if you did a search for that same person and their research online. Again, it goes to your point, Ken, that Google search is a direct linear path to solving a problem, and it doesn't employ that as much, that human touch, that community feedback. And I think that's so much what I'm hearing you guys say. I think it's true. I know it's true in my own experience as a classroom teacher. There's so much more to learn. So much more of the process involves the human interaction, the mess ups, the conversations about what will work and what will not. And again, I think that design process encourages that. It's really interesting that honestly, I've got an artist and an engineer, a scientist sitting here at the table across from me, which is beautiful because in both those fields, the artists and the engineering process, the art design process and the engineering design process are so similar, almost identical. And so that's one thing that I think, looping it back around to the Imagineers, what they do so beautifully is they take the dreamers who say, let's make an elephant fly, and the engineer who says, well, an elephant can't really fly, and then the artist says, but yeah, what if we could? The what if? And then the engineer said, well, we could do this, and we could design this, and we could make it like this, and what we're left with is Dumbo Ride, which is one of the most popular rides in any Disney park. And it takes both of those types of thinking, working together in community in a very highly interactive way to create success, to create something powerful. Ken, Chris, thanks so much for joining us today for this first part of a two-part series and talking about creativity and imagination. I'm excited to have you guys with me for this kickoff, and I'm going to take advantage of having you while I do for a second exploration into this topic. And I hope you'll join us next time when we will be talking more about the importance of storytelling, as well as the importance of instilling dreams in children and maintaining those dreams in ourselves as well. So I hope you'll join us next time for that podcast. And until then, if you'd like to learn more about Imagineering Education, check out our website at imagineeringedu.com, where you can learn how to bring us into your school or your business through workshops and featured speaker series, as well as webinars. So until then, we hope you have a great day, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks a lot.